To those people in the huts and villages of half the globe struggling to break the bonds of mass misery, we pledge our best efforts to help them help themselves. Not because we seek their votes, but because it is right. If a free society cannot help the many who are poor, it cannot save the few who are rich. Let both sides unite to heed in all corners of the earth the command of Isaiah to undo the heavy burden and let the oppressed go free. And if a beachhead of cooperation may push back the jungle of suspicion, let both sides join in creating a new endeavor, not a new balance of power, but a new world of law where the strong are just and the weak secure and the peace preserved. Now the trumpet summons us again, not as a call to bear arms, not as a call to battle, but a call to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle, year in and year out, rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, a struggle against the common enemies of man, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself. Can we forge against these enemies a grand and global alliance, north and south, east and west, that can assure a more fruitful life for all mankind? Will you join in that historic effort? In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not shrink from this responsibility. I welcome it. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
That was 50 years ago, 20 years before the me generation declared greed is good. It was a time when we helped the needy, knowing that the rich could take care of themselves. It was a time of prosperity and fairness. Not a perfect time, but one that gave us hope. The middle class was growing and our bills were being paid. Now, after 30 years of conservative economics, we have seen all that slip away as we are almost fell into another Great Depression. All because of greed and selfishness. The haves wanted more and took it from the have-nots. The national debt was run up to enrich them even more. And when it came time to pay the bills, they proclaimed, let the poor pay them as we have to cut taxes for the rich. It wasn't enough, so they cut safety regulations and put us all at risk just so they could make another buck.
There is a need for strong government oversight of industry. Since Ronald Reagan, the conservative governing philosophy has been that all government is bad. But, as President Obama noted, government could have been and should have been a positive influence over BP. Instead, regulations were lax and those in charge corrupt.
On April 20th, an explosion ripped through BP Deepwater Horizon drilling rig, about 40 miles off the coast of Louisiana. 11 workers lost their lives. 17 others were injured. BP will pay for the impact this spill has had on the region. The third part of our response plan is the steps we're taking to ensure that a disaster like this does not happen again. And one place we've already begun to take action is at the agency in charge of regulating drilling and issuing permits, known as the Minerals Management Service. Over the last decade, this agency has become emblematic of a failed philosophy that views all regulation with hostility. A philosophy that says corporations should be allowed to play by their own rules and police themselves. At this agency, industry insiders were put in charge of industry oversight. Oil companies showered regulators with gifts and favors and were essentially allowed to conduct their own safety inspections and write their own regulations. So one of the lessons we've learned from this spill is that we need better regulations, better safety standards, and better enforcement when it comes to offshore drilling. But a larger lesson is that no matter how much we improve our regulation of the industry, drilling for oil these days entails greater risk.
The Republican philosophy that says corporations should be allowed to play by their own rules and police themselves has brought on this and many other disasters. When Republicans were in charge, such industry insiders were put in charge of industry oversight. Oil companies showered regulators with gifts and favors, and were essentially allowed to conduct their own safety inspections and write their own regulations. Republicans have been willing to hand over the keys of the nation to all these corporations. Republican Congressman Joe Biden apologized to BP for being forced to pay for the damages that they caused. Other Republicans said essentially the same thing: Congressman Tom Price, Michelle Bachmann, Rush Limbaugh, among others. Just listen to their outrage that the president would hold them accountable.
I'm ashamed of what happened in the White House yesterday. I think it is a tragedy of the first proportion that a private corporation can be subjected to what I would characterize as a shakedown. In this case, a $20 billion shakedown. So I'm only speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I apologize.
Because I'm telling you, every time, this is another bailout fund called something else, and we'll see who gets it. If Obama's past is prologue, and it is, then this is going to be used as a little miniature slush fund.
The president just called for creating a fund. It would be administered by outsiders, which would be more of a redistribution of wealth fund, and then now it appears that we're going to be looking at that one more gateway for more government control, more money to government.
What I don't like from the president's administration is this sort of, I'll put my boot heel on the throat of BP. I think that sounds really un-American in his criticism of business.
I just don't see how Republicans can claim to be for law and order until it comes to big business. To me, it all sounds a bit hypocritical. Why do Republicans think that regulation of big corporations is so bad? Don't they care about the public's safety? It just doesn't make any sense to tell the private citizen that he or she has to follow public regulations while telling private big business that they don't. This Republican crisis in the Gulf is just more proof that their hands-off approach to big business doesn't work.
What Republicans forget is that America was founded on the principle of community. We are not a nation of individuals, but rather one large community. We all live by rules designed to make living better for all Americans. The Constitution does not distinguish between the rich and the rest of us. In its eyes, we all are equal, but obviously not in the eyes of the Republican Party.
Throughout history there have been classes of people: the peasant class, the middle class, and the aristocracy. The aristocracy was considered to be better than anyone else. They were the lords and kings. The laws were different for the nobility. Usually, they could only get in trouble if they harmed another in that upper class. They could actually kill a peasant without any repercussions.
In America there is no aristocracy. Even though we use these labels of classes, that doesn't mean that any group or people have any more rights than anyone else. That is the beauty of America. We all are equal. Thomas Jefferson said it best in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
This current Republican crisis should serve as evidence that the conservative philosophy of limited government is a failed philosophy, even as it is advanced today by the GOP and their tea-bagger party allies. You would have thought the lesson would have been learned after the economic collapse in 2008, which was caused by lax oversight of Wall Street, but the Republican Party is running in 2010 on a return to the governing style of George W. Bush.